So got a couple things we're going to do here today. We're going to clean this up, get most of the wiring harness off of here, label it before I take it off. Take this truck intake manifold off, put on my LS2 intake manifold that I picked up, see how that fits and everything, what I got to do as far as moving alternator and whatnot. And the other thing I want to do is look at this 5-speed, this NV3500, and compare it to my LT1 T56 6-speed. I know the LT1 T56 has a shorter input shaft than the LS1 style, but the LS1 style uses the car pilot bearing, which is deeper inside the crankshaft than the truck pilot bearing, which is a little bit closer to the transmission itself. So I'm curious if there's any way I can make a truck pilot bearing work with a shorter input shaft LT1 T56, because those are at least $1,000 cheaper than the LS1 style. And if it will work, I think I'm going to end up going 6-speed with this rather than the 5-speed, because it would be the better way to go. Well, the garage is a little bit of a wreck right now, but that's okay because we're getting stuff figured out. So, figuring out the pilot bearing on this thing. We are 3/8, maybe 5/16 from the bell housing face to where the end of the pilot bearing is. And I should actually measure back the other way too. So it is 3/4 to the very end where the input shaft starts to have the splines. And here is the LT1 T56. So we protrude 1/8 from the end and about 7/8 depth behind the bell housing mounting flange. Now I'm going to double check here just to make sure that my SFI bell, exactly 5-inch, is the same as the factory one. That might be 4 15/16. So that means it would protrude a hair more with the stock bell housing than with this QuickTime on it, but that's, I think, inconsequential. So according to those measurements, it looks like I can make an LT1 T56 work with the truck pilot bearing. Gonna have to run the LT1 pull clutch and this whole clutch fork deal. And my biggest issue with that, I mean, the reason I want to do an LT1 T56, you can get them at least $1,000 cheaper than the LS1 style. But this slave cylinder is huge, and that's going to be right where my throttle pedal has to be, probably in a Beretta, because we're already going to be super tight in a Beretta. That may be a deal breaker, but that may be a bridge I have to cross when I get there, because it certainly would be a lot nicer to go a 6-speed than this 5-speed. Strength-wise, gear-wise, everything would be a little better, except for price, because the T56 is going to blow that $5,000 budget for the whole car running and driving. It made me curious now, though, what the difference is in length, because I know the splines on the output shaft are the same for a drive shaft. What if I have to get a new drive shaft? If, say, maybe a 5-speed died and I wanted to replace it with a 6-speed, I wonder if they're the same length. So we're talking, not a perfect measurement, but about 30.5 to the center of the U-joint from the bell housing. We are talking, yeah, 33.5. So there definitely would have to be a new drive shaft. And this is even, I think the LT1 T56s are about 1 inch shorter than the LS1 style. So that will be some rework, definitely, if I go that route. Probably transmission mount too. Let's see. So to the transmission mount, we'll call that 26 6 1/4 maybe. And then on this thing, let's see. There is it. Oh, that's like 27, it looks like. So yeah, rework on both sides of that. If I go 5-speed first, kill it, and then go 6-speed. So 6-speed money up front might kill the budget, but it might be smart money too. Save some rework. So I borrowed a flywheel from my brother-in-law. He was going to go manual behind his 74 Impala wagon. I have a video on that later. But he decided to make it pathetic automatic strum with the TH400. So I borrowed this flywheel from him just to check some stuff out. And this is a clutch I took out of my old truck, my old Z71. That was an NV4500 with a small block. But from what I've read, this disc should fit the NV3500. Hey, look at that. So then, as long as this, I went on Rock Auto and saw they're both like 12-inch clutches for an NV3500 and NV4500. So I'm wondering if this small block pressure plate will fit the LS flywheel. It looks like it does. Look at that. So I could have a free clutch in this thing. Pulled the clutch out of my old truck because it killed the shift work, and the wifey couldn't drive it because the clutch was too heavy. She'd go like 5 miles, and that was it. Ooh, that's tight. To drill out that hole. The other one fit. That one fits. So let's see here. 3 of the bolt holes, right? It looks like they're in the right spot. Looks like the holes are lined up, but only half of them will actually thread in. I might have to take like a unibit to the pressure plate and make that work. So I found I did have to drill these out with a unibit because they were a tight clearance hole on 3/8, which is the bolt size for the small block stuff. Where these were like 415 thou, which is like 10.5 millimeter. And the LS flywheel uses M10 bolts. And the hex head bolts that I had would not work. Because I remember with this clutch, you couldn't even use a washer on them with the 3/8 bolts because the 12-inch disc is so close to the bolt heads here. So I got these cap screws to fix that problem. And that should keep everything happy. So here's the truck pilot bearing installed. This is the car one. I forgot to get a little comparison before I put them in there. But this one sits deeper in the crankshaft. There's another register inside where this is probably 3/4 of an inch closer to the crank side than the trans side. Well, there you have it. Small block Chevy clutch on an LS with a 10-spline disc that fits the 10-spline NV3500. So I have a free solution if that's the way I want to go. Well, all those measurements are bupkis. I was wondering if I could use the regular style clutch rather than the pull style clutch. If there was room, I mean, it's within like 1/8 of an inch of having enough room for a regular slave instead of doing the clutch fork deal and all that. But the bell housing will not even fit the LS1 flywheel that's hitting on there. So that ain't happening. So unless I run across a LS1 style T56 for a smoking deal, I'm just going to run with this one because it's free fitty. You can get an LT1 style T56 and then you have to change this front plate so that it will accept the slave cylinder right in there, the concentric slave cylinder. You have to get another bell housing and you have to swap the input shaft. And that will make it essentially an LS1 T56. But that stuff is also like $400 or $500. And at that point, you're getting close to the cost of a regular LS1 T56 anyway. So I guess the moral of the story is free 5-speed it is. We'll keep it under budget, at least to start with.